I'm Hazel Adam from Hazel A Patterns, and today I'm going to do a demonstration for you of how to sew the lining of this pattern of mine, which is called the Wet'n'Dry Washbag. You'll see in front of you, it's basically a boxy pouch, but with lots of pockets. So you've got a pocket in the front here, one on the back as well, and then the best part about this is you've got two separate compartments inside. The idea being that you can put your toothbrush in one of them and your washcloth in the other, and it just means that you're not going to worry about things getting cross-contaminated or touching each other when you're going away. Now, this is a more complicated pattern than many that I have done in the past. It's not complicated once you know what you're doing, but there are a couple of really fiddly parts. So what I'm going to do for you today, I'm not going to show you the whole thing. I'm just going to show you the really complicated part, which is putting in the two linings. So I don't know if you can see there, you're looking up inside the pouch, you've got a centre seam, you've got some very short seams in here, and everything is turned through one of the short seams. So, right, I'll just pop that to one side. I'll show you what you get when you get my pattern. This is my printed copy. Now, I hate to say this, but I have got a laser printer, which is fabulous for printing out millions and millions of pattern pages, but is not the best thing in the world for printing out patterns. So I promise you the pictures are not like this at all when you actually get it on the internet, when you download it. But you can see there, you've got a cutting list, you've got instructions on what you need, and then the written instructions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sort of whiz through step one a little bit, and then you will actually for the first time ever see me sewing on my machine. Now, really hope that this is going to be nice and clear and visible. I have a red sewing machine which I absolutely love. It is not the best thing in the world for photographing because it's so vibrant, but we will do our best. Okay, I'll also show you, before we get going, a couple of other little things. When you receive your pattern, you'll also get printable pattern pieces. Now, I have seen double pouches made before. There are some fantastic YouTube tutorials, but most of the time they don't actually have all the shapes cut out for you. So basically you cut out rectangles, and then after that you have to cut out other pieces as you go along. As you can see with these, you actually, all of the pattern pieces are shaped. And what you do, you would print those off, cut them out, join them together so that you've got full pattern pieces. And then there's a couple of pieces as well which are cut out, and the sizes are given in inches so that you can use your quilting rulers on the pattern. Now, this version is for my lovely husband, who has asked for it to be made in waterproof canvas because he's worried about it getting wrecked because he goes away quite a bit. So he's having a grey canvas for the top sections, and you can see what you have there is a centre, outer, and then you've got the two side pieces from the pattern. And then inside, the lining sections look like this. Now, this lining, this waterproof lining that I'm using, is black on the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a pale coloured thread so it's really obvious where I'm stitching. Hopefully when I get to making the video itself, to editing the video, I will be able to add some lines in as well so you can see what we're doing. Okay, so we've got 4 of these, 3 of these. There are 2 more pieces that you would cut out, but I haven't cut those out already because the canvas is upstairs, the rest of the canvas, and that part is actually fairly straightforward. So, oh, one last thing as well, continuous zipping. I am using a number 5 continuous zip. I've put the zip heads on already. I tend to keep my zipping on the card if I've got a quantity of it, and then actually cut it off after I've stitched it in, because that way I can move the zip head out of the way, so I don't have to worry about moving it while I'm stitching, and then afterwards there's no wastage because you literally cut it off where you need to. So that's that. I am going to go away and sew these pieces together, and then I will come back and show you where we're going next. Okay, let's get going. Right, that's that done. I am back. So just to recap, what we have done is stitched essentially this top panelled section here. I just wanted to do something on camera as a reminder to anybody who's doing this. Before you cut the zip off, try to remember to open the zip and make sure that the zipper head is actually where you want it. Would have been very easy for me to cut it off with the zip on the other side. Right, just so you can see what we've got our two top panels, we've got the centre panel. Now these are top stitched in different ways. So for example, this outer panel you can see is actually top stitched through the lining as well. This is to try and keep it back from the zip and to keep it in position when the bag is completely made. The other one is not, partly because this is a tiny bit of seam that you're going to be stitching here, and what you don't want to find is that if you've done a really deep top stitching, it would make it even harder to actually match up. So what we've got now is two pairs of linings. That's one, that's the other. And what I am going to do next, and I won't do it on camera because it's fairly straightforward. I'm only going to work on one pair at the moment. I'm going to stitch the bottom seam and I'm going to leave a turning gap so that you can turn the whole thing through the seam later. Okay, away I go. And here we are. You can see that I have stitched the bottom seam. I have left a approximately 6-inch gap for turning, and I have actually pressed it back using a really low iron because this waterproof fabric can melt very easily. So what you'll notice now is this is actually a grown on bottom half of your boxy pouch. So under normal circumstances you would have either a separate gusset that went all the way round, or you would have it sort of made in one piece round that way with a little side gusset, but this one is made all in one piece. So this is actually going to become your side, and to do that it's going to have to match up with this here, and I don't know if you can see, it is not exactly the same size, but it is very close to. So this corner here that is attached to your zip, you're going to have to stitch through just the lining section. So what I suggested in my instructions is you put your corners together. I would also suggest using lots of clips to try and hold it in place, and then you're going to need to stitch 1/4 of an inch in from there, as far in as you can get. Then you're going to turn it over and do the other side, other half of that. Now when you stitch in a number 5 zip, you end up with a 1/4 inch seam, you end up with 3/4 of an inch here of fabric for the tape. So that's why this actually matches up fairly well. Not completely, because if I made this slightly smaller, it would just be almost impossible to sew. So again, this smaller piece here, you're going to clip it and stitch along as far as you can go. What you will end up with is a little gap over the zip, but we'll come to that later and stitch across the whole thing when the lining compartments are both made. Right, I'm going to take you over to the sewing machine now and we will do that stitching. Here we go, welcome to my lovely red sewing machine. Okay, I've got the piece here. I have clipped one side, but I decided I would do the other side so you can see. All I've done is I have rolled around any excess fabric so that the ends are actually level, and then I've just popped a clip on the end. I could have pinned it. I don't know about anybody else, but I have hand strength issues, so it might be that I do pin the next one, but at the moment I have just clipped it just to hold it, and then hopefully my hands will hold it in the way. Now, normally for all my seams I use a 1/4 inch foot. 1/4 inch seam allowances, there's hardly any waste when you're cutting 1/4 inch, and if you're doing any curves, it makes it really easy to do the curves without having to spend ages clipping them and pinning them in position. So that's one of the reasons I use a 1/4 inch. I found with my hand strength, and because these are tiny little spaces, it was really hard to actually get the foot in position. So I have got a 1/4 inch zipper foot instead, and so I have chosen to use that for this. Let's just move that up a tiny bit more because it's not quite level. Put my clip back in. So what I'm going to do, I don't know if you can see, the zip is under there, it goes up to about here. I'm going to stitch as far forwards as I can without actually stitching over the zip. So here we go. Okay. You'll notice my machine has a few little quirks. I have to hold the thread when I start going, otherwise it pulls in and forms loops. Oops. And also it has the slowest, like that loop, it has the slowest reverse stitch of any machine I've ever used. But luckily this bit's all on the inside and nobody's going to see. So, I mean, basically what you're doing here is trying to show that you've joined the part that you're going to stitch up on the corners in a minute. So that is a pretty rough looking seam, but when it gets to the inside you won't see any of that. So I'm going to flip this over so I'm working from the outside in, otherwise you'd find yourself reversing up over the ridge there. Holding that in position as tightly as I can. Adjust my tension. It could be my tension because I changed the tension to stitch through the layers before. Right. So actually I've got quite a way in here, probably about 3/4 of an inch or so. There we go. So I'm going to do the other end. If I unfurl that, you can see that is now joined to the zipper. Oh, unfurl the other side, and then these little openings here are now our corner seams. So that's the base, this is the side, that's the corner. So let me just turn this around and let's clip the other side in place. So if anybody has got hand strength issues, the other thing that I found for doing some sewing jobs, not others, is to have the flatbed to your machine fitted. I don't use it all the time because it's quite big and then I have to make a lot more space for it. But actually, under the circumstances for this one, for this thing, it was ideal because the weight of the piece could be held to one side. the other edge. There we go. Because otherwise I found I was really fighting with it wanting to slide off the machine because of the weight. Right, here we go. Again. Typical. That never happens to me normally, but because I'm so busy chatting instead of sewing, I've just pulled my thread out. There we go. Let's try that again. So go as far forward as you can. Also helps to have pulled your zipper pull back slightly so that you're not actually trying to stitch over it. I don't know if you can see there. So that's that side. Let's do the other corner. And here we go. So forwards as far as you can go. And then I'm reversing all the way back on this because it's such a short seam, it doesn't seem to matter. Okay, right. Now, what you can see we've ended up with are, there's a point here, like a corner shape, and there's another one at this end. So we're going to open this piece out and literally pull it flat. Now to do that you have to bend the zip. Everything is now attached to the zip, and the zip eventually is going to go around the corner at the top. So under these circumstances, what I suggested doing, I flipped it over so that you can see the seam. I'm going to sew this seam in two parts. Now this also makes it much easier when you come to fit the main body of the thing afterwards. So what I'm going to do, I am going to use pins. I wouldn't normally on waterproof fabric, but I'm actually going to pin it into the seam allowance so that it's not going to make any holes. And again, still working with 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to stitch up to the flap. Now you can see this bit just wants to do its own thing, which is why you have to sort of tame it with pins and clips or anything you need. So I'm going to start that off by stitching, reverse stitching, doing it this way round, stitching the bottom up and then stitching the top section just means you've actually got a bit more control. And this pattern is all about control. As I said, it just wants to bounce up into shape because essentially you're creating a 3D shape from 2D pieces, like every pattern. So here we go. Let's stitch up to the top there and do my slow and majestic reversing. So that's the first half of that seam done. So that is, let's take off my threads. You can see now I've just got a little tiny gap at the top, just here. Don't know if you can see that, there's the silver showing through, and because I've already stitched that bottom half of the seam, it is going to sit nice and flat without having to put any pins in at all. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to pull out a bit more thread. I've reversed back to that flap and then gone forwards just over that little corner bit there. So essentially you're going to do the same thing 4 times, once for each corner. So there we go, that's what it looks like, and you can see the zip has been folded down. Let's do it again with the next corner, so you can see once you've tamed it, it's fine, but up until that point it keeps wanting to spring back up. So this time I'm going to have to stitch from that section downwards. And this is where it really wants to do its own thing. There we go. So I've bent the zip in the end to tame it. So I'm holding the zip underneath my thumb, got my little flap pointing upwards so I don't stitch over it. Pull my thread round so it's out of the way. Obviously what I'm not going to do is stitch over that pin, so once I've got this in position and the needle down, I'm actually going to move it out of the way. I often find I don't use pins when I'm sewing, but sometimes you've just got to. Ooh. And you can see everything wants to move. So stitch backwards, just up to the flap. Just check that everything's still lined up nicely, which it is, and you put your foot down this time. Reverse stitch just to secure that. And then you've got your first 2 corners nearly done, just that top little bit to do. You can see there, that is starting to form the box shape. Right. So again, pull it nice and flat. I mean, you could do this with a 1/4 inch foot, but the other thing with this is I get a lot more visibility. I can really see what I'm doing. I can concentrate on keeping that zip out of the way. And there we go. Second side done. Oops. You can just see a little wobble there because I managed to hit the light. There we go. So that's 1/2 done. So you've got the box shape formed at the bottom there, and at the top the zip is pulled down and you've got a little bit of boxing there inside. So let me just do the other side. And we're back. I have completed the second compartment. I'm showing it to you upside down at the moment, so you can see you've got the two compartments just resting side by side. And if I turn it over, you can see this part of the zip is joined essentially to the bag there, to the lining compartment. Okay, so what we have to do next is we need to actually stitch across this entire section here, because at the moment we've still got the gaps. Remember, we mentioned the gaps before, and this is where it comes in handy that you have that seam allowance free, because you can pull it to join, pull it there to join. You're going to overlap your center one. Again, it will need to be pulled because it is at this point the zips want to keep pulling it straight, but obviously we've bent them now. So that's that there, that's that there. This seam needs to be stitched open. Oops. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over to the machine and stitch it so you can see what it looks like when it's ready. And here we are. I should probably have changed back to my dark grey thread for this, because just in case it gets seen when I finish up the bag if I don't take the right amount of seam allowance. However, it makes it easier for you to see. So what I've done here, all the seam allowances are squashed flat. I actually stitched it from the front, so I pressed that down with my hands, had loads of clips across the front, and just stitched across at 1/4 of an inch. So when you open it up from the inside, you've got that nice finish there. The other side as well. You've got a nice finish inside there. You can see that it's bagged out so that it forms the compartment. Now, to finish this off, the next stage is to put the bottom panel on, which has a zipped pocket, as I showed you earlier. Same on the other side. And then when you go to join the outer boxy pouch, it is exactly the same as joining one of the inner ones. The only thing is it's a little bit easier on the sides because you don't have to worry about stitching it down to here. So essentially you can see you'll end up stitching down there, down the sides. The bottom is all finished off because of course you can turn it through the lining. I'll just show you the other one that I made. This one is actually for me personally, and I have already used it to go away. You notice the wrist strap. I did a wrist strap masterclass which goes with this. It's completely free to download, so you can get it from my website. I'll show you inside. Proof that a tiny bottle of soap fits in perfectly, and I had my toothbrush in the other side. And then just in case you're thinking, what can I put in the front pockets, because they're quite little, I have cotton buds in one side. I think I had some cotton wool, that sort of thing. I mean, obviously you could use reusable. And my medication in the other side. So just do that back up. So that's one there. And let me just get the other one for you. These gorgeous Ambo fabrics. If there's any more queries you have about completing this bag, then please drop me a line through my website or leave a comment below the video. And that's it. Happy sewing to you. I hope that it solves any conundrums you have and you can actually get this pattern finished. Okay, thank you for listening. Bye.